Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
And that's right, everybody. Welcome back once again to another edition of the Best Seat in the House podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rob Kramer, joined by my co-host, who's on location today from Citi Field, Daniel Bobo Curlin. Dan, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good today. As you all probably saw from the thumbnail on the video, today was Howie Rose bobblehead day, as seen in the thumbnail.
Absolutely. We got the Howie Rose bobblehead day going on, and Dan is out representing the Best Seat in the House podcast as best he can at the.
Yep, that's correct. I'm in the promenade section of Citi Field, upper deck, and as you can see, I'm sure for those of you who have been to Citi Field, you know there's a little area behind in the middle of the promenade section where there's like tables and stuff. You know, some people want to eat before the game, so this is a good spot for that. So I knew it'd be a good spot to film today.
Absolutely, man. And we got plenty to get into today. And you know what? Let's just start it off where everything kicked off last night on this homestand for the Mets, as the Mets went out last night and had a great game. I mean, it was an up and down road trip, a couple of nice wins, but 2-4, not exactly where we want it. But they come home yesterday, a highly anticipated divisional matchup against the Phillies, and Kodei Senga turned in his best performance. 7 innings, 1 hit, no runs, no walks, 9 strikeouts. Mets win 9-2. Dan, what was your reaction to probably the best we've seen of Kodei Senga so far?
Oh no, I knew once he got the hang of pitching in the major league, he was going to come up big in some big spots, and boy did he. Probably also because in honor of Senga, I picked up some Mario Brothers figurines at the Nintendo store, right?
Yeah.
And Mario and Luigi, but also I picked up a Boo from the Mario Brother video game, and I figured, when Senga starts, you gotta rub the Boo for good luck.
Yeah, you're right about that, man. Rub that Boo. I was watching the pregame show yesterday on SNY as Todd Zeal and Gary Apple and all the guys over there were on the city, like on the infield, getting ready, in foul territory, getting ready for the pregame and going through all their normal stuff. And it was funny because every once in a while you would hear they kept playing a ghost sound effect in the background, so you would hear the ghosts go by and everything, and it really kind of set the tone for a great game pitched by Kodei Senga. This guy was hitting right out of the gate in the first inning. He had great stuff, 97 mile an hour, 98 mile an hour fastball that was just blowing by guys no matter where he put it. Really loved seeing, what we got out of Senga, and this is the guy that we were advertised this offseason, right? This was the pitcher, the ace caliber guy that we thought we were getting, right?
Exactly. That felt as easy of a Mets win as a low-scoring game could be.
Yeah, you're right. I got a little bit worried, I have to admit. I got a little bit worried when they took him out after 7, and I totally get it. You can't knock Buck for this. Senga, still with these Japanese pitchers, you kind of want to take your time with him. He's still not used to going every 5 or 6 days, so you don't want to overtax him still pretty early on in the season. But, so you could understand Buck taking him out 7 innings, 100 pitches. Totally get it. But I got to admit, when Adam Ottavino came in and walked the first batter on 4 pitches, I started to get a little nervous. How about you?
Oh yeah, I was feeling a little bit nervous. Like my mother had also got pacifier playing in the living room. She kind of knew that look on my face that she only sees during baseball season.
Yeah.
But after that was an easy win. Uh, uh, a runner getting thrown out at second base by Alvarez. It actually got ruled in our favor, that challenge. For
Yeah,
once,
you're
they
right.
ruled in our favor, and for once, I wasn't yelling out whenever an umpire makes a bad call on a challenge. Bullshit, bullshit. I also do that during hockey season when a ref makes a bad call.
Of course, and they deserve it, as all these officials do, because for the most part they all stink.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but yeah, man. I mean, we had a. It was definitely a really just you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that it felt as safe as it can for as low scoring as a game it was, and you're right. And it's funny too because even though it did feel safe, and you're right for the most part, it also was like a kind of momentous game in a lot of ways for a 2-0 game. I mean, we had a breakout game from Senga. We had that great throw from Alvarez behind the plate and the tag from McNeil, and not to mention a big home run from Lindor off of Ranger Suarez to break up a scoreless tie in the 6th inning. That was a pretty big home run for Lindor, who has been getting a lot of crap from Met fans this year. Well, not necessarily just Met fans, but he's been getting a lot of crap from like New York sports reporters and everything. I'm thinking of Brandon Tierney specifically from WFAN, who has constantly called out Lindor, which, his batting average isn't that great, but I can't knock Lindor this year. He's having a pretty decent year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Lindor's gonna have a great year. You just gotta be a little patient sometimes, but once he gets going, it's it's gonna be huge.
Yeah, man, you're absolutely right. Now, one last thing on Senga, too. I want to ask your opinion on this. So, right now, Kodai Senga, he has an ERA over 6 on the road, and he has one of the lowest home ERAs in baseball. I mean, he seems to be one of those guys where he loves the home cooking. And I personally don't read too much into it yet because we're still really early on in the season, so it's still a very small sample size. But what do you think about it, Dan? Do you think there's any merit to maybe Senga's stuff just plays a little bit better at home than it does on the road?
I don't really think there's really an issue. Of course, a couple of days ago may have been a little issue because we know how kind of question mark Wrigley Field it can be with the weather, depending. They did that whole thing they say about what the way the wind blows there at Wrigley Field can be.
Yep.
They say it was like Coors Field before Coors Field was a thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, the one of the most famous games of all time, scoring wise, was that crazy game between the Phillies and the Cubs in the '70s, where both teams scored 20 runs, and that was at Wrigley Field. That was one of the craziest games. Obviously, we're both too young to have actually seen that game, but I remember hearing about that game and Gary Cohen and all the Fran Healy, Howie Rose, all the guys talking over the years of having covered this team. And obviously, the Mets weren't even involved in that game. So, so you are right that Wrigley Field does have the history of being a launching pad. So, as much as you would have still liked to see Senga gut it out a little bit more, I mean, hey, to 5 innings, 3 runs at as they would call it, the friendly confines of Wrigley Field, that's not as bad as it looks on paper, right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, also I probably during that series may have got into a pizza argument with everybody from Chicago again, as I'm not afraid to get into a pizza argument there. Our pizza is better. That stuff in Chicago, what the heck is that stuff? That's a giant thick piece of bread with some sort of sauce and a cheese at the bottom. I don't know what that is, but it ain't pizza.
It's
You
closer to
want
cake.
than it is pizza.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And then they eat it with a fork and knife. Really?
Come on.
There was one. There was
Yeah.
one time I was in the area. Unfortunately, there wasn't a game going on at Wrigley, so I didn't get to go to Wrigley that time. But what I did do, I showed them, even though I think New York pizza is a lot better, I showed them by eating a slice of Chicago pizza, whatever their deep dish, whatever they call it, with my hands. Show them.
like a real man.
Yup, and like a New Yorker. Unlike when Bill de Blasio was mayor, a mayor that doesn't know how to eat pizza. That's another story, of course.
I knew that De Blasio was coming.
How could you be mayor of New York and eat pizza with a fork and knife? I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense.
Very true. You're right. You're right about that, man. And now, let's turn our attention to the game that you're going to be seeing tonight, as the Mets are going to be going up to try to take the series already from the Phillies, as they could clinch tonight by taking 2 out of 3. Mets Phillies tonight, 7:10 p.m., just over an hour away. We got Carlos Carrasco against Aaron Nola. Now, we both know one guy in the Mets lineup who has great numbers against Aaron Nola. That's Pete Alonso. But let's take a quick look at the rest of this Met lineup that you're going to be seeing tonight, Dan. And here we go. So we'll take a look at it. And it's Brandon Nimmo leading off, Francisco Lindor batting second, Jeff McNeil in the 3-hole, followed by Pete Alonso hitting cleanup. Then we got Brett Beatty, Starlin Marte, and Daniel Vogelback. And the final 2 are Mark Canha and Tomas Nido. So, I mean, look, I know a lot of Met fans are not thrilled to see Francisco Alvarez not in the lineup. Personally, the guy is 21 years old and, can probably go. Even if he's tired, you could DH him. So I don't know, Dan, how do you feel about that lineup? Because I know there's a lot of anger among Met fans with Daniel Vogelback still being on this team too. So, what do you think about that?
I feel they could have DH'd Alvarez in this lineup. Another thing, they're underutilizing Mark Vientos. How do you even expect this guy to even get to where you expect him to if he's on the bench too much?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, Mark Vientos has been up here for at least over 2 weeks now, maybe even more than that, and he doesn't even have 20 at bats. I mean, Daniel Vogelback has done nothing to deserve being out there. Now, look, we were talking last week's episode about, maybe reducing the playtime for Eduardo Escobar, but Eduardo Escobar has actually come around over the last week, and he's playing much better in a more part-time role on the bench. So I'm all for keeping around Eduardo Escobar. I'm a big fan of the guy. As long as he's hitting and everything and contributing, he definitely is a viable and valuable option on this team. But Daniel Vogelback, I just don't see it. The guy doesn't hit for power. He's only good for a walk every once in a while. He's hitting down in the 220s, and even if he gets on base, all he does is clog up the base path, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I get nervous when this guy's at bat. I say, "Oh boy, oh, come on, really?" And I probably drink another swig of whatever beer I'm drinking that time because I'm gonna need it for that. Like really? Really? And I was like, "Come on, put Vientos in a lineup. You don't need to treat him like the sneakers I only wear on game day." And by the way, I'll show you these sneakers. Hold on, if I could see if I can show these. You go these shoes.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I got my sister got me these. They were a late rival birthday present because of the amount of time it takes to ship these things, I guess, or whenever the window sheets got them for me for my birthday. But those are custom orange and blue 90s that my sister got me.
Those are nice shoes, man. Tell your sister. Good job. Good job.
Yeah, and So these are a good reason why I only wear them on game days. I don't want them ruined too much, so I bring them out when I'm at the game.
I get it, man. I totally get it. You don't want to waste those shoes on non-game days. Those shoes look like they have a lot of wins in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully they'll have a lot of wins when I'm here at the stadium. And I'm wearing
Exactly.
I'm wearing those things home and road games.
Oh yeah,
Anytime I'm
no,
at a Mets game, those things are going to wear. As a matter of fact, even though, of course, obviously, I probably won't be at every playoff game. I'll probably get to be at some playoff games if we get there. But every game day during the playoffs, I'm wearing those shoes. If once we get there, once we make it.
absolutely, man. I think we're both pretty confident that the Mets are going to make it. They still have certain things they have to address on this team, but I think we can both confidently say that the Mets are in good hands right now. I think Epler is going to do what needs to be done at the deadline, and I think that obviously that Steve Cohen's going to provide the money, and we could not have a better manager. Let's focus on Buck for a sec too, because I've seen a lot of Met fans have turned on Buck this year. Look, not everything is going to look as easy as it did last year. Everything just kind of fell into place last year. The guys got off to hot starts. Aside from DeGrom, they are relatively healthy. So, you have to look at each season individually. Not everything is going to go the exact same way. The Mets are going through a little bit of a finding themselves period right now. And I couldn't think of a better guy to be in charge of that than Buck Showalter, right, Dan?
Exactly. I really feel Buck Showalter's got the pulse in his team, and if things got on a little bit of a rut, he'll get kind of had the composure to right the ship with the managing this team. So I'm not worried now, especially at this point of the season. We got off to a little slow start, but now we're starting to a little bit come around. And even though that kind of those 3 games at Colorado kind of went a little bit back and forth, didn't quite turn out. But unfortunately, that kind of happens in Colorado. Fortunately, they haven't quite figured out the baseball in that state, unfortunately how nature is over there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, there's not much else we could say about that. The Mets go for the series victory tonight against the Phillies, so that'd be really cool to see that play out. Hopefully, the Mets can come through for our buddy Dan out there in Flushing tonight. But
and get a Mets win the first time I've ever worn these shoes, by the way.
Oh, that's true too. And before we move on from the Mets too, as they're going to be trying to get you that win tonight, what's your confidence level in Carlos Carrasco as we're sitting here talking about it? I mean, Carrasco's been up and down this year, but it looks like with that last start, he might have found it, right?
I feel like Carlos Carrasco right now feels like Oliver Perez during his time in the Mets when he was doing okay. It was like he's going to be really good or really bad. And just I hope we get really good today.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, you're right. That's definitely a good comparison. It kind of reminds me of like 2008 Oliver Perez, because actually 2007 he was really, really good, but 2008 he was like up and down, and yeah, he kind of had like one good start, one bad start type deal. So I could definitely see that. I like that comparison a lot. And it's all going to be hanging on his arm, because he's one of the guys that they really need to come through. You have Verlander and Scherzer that you at least hope and keep your fingers crossed you can count on those guys. Then obviously you have Peterson, who you don't know what you're going to get out of him. He's back in the minor leagues now. McGill, but the real wild card is Carlos Carrasco, and seeing what they get out of him, because if he could be anything like the pitcher he was for most of last year, then that's going to really, really help the Mets and help the bullpen too, right, Dan?
Exactly. Also, I feel it's a little bit still ahead of time, but as it gets closer to the end of the first half of the season, I think the Mets are going to have to go all in on pitching during the trading deadline. My gut
Yeah,
feeling says they're going to have to get a pitcher trading deadline and not half-ass it this time, Billy Epler, the GM. Do not half-ass it. Go all in.
yeah, you're right. Now, you know the one thing, and I totally agree with you too, that they have to go all in. I mean, obviously, the dream is that they come away with a guy like Otani. So you kind of solve getting a pitcher and a bat in the same way. But who knows what the market's going to be for him? Who knows if the Angels are even going to be in contention or not? So I guess we'll have to just see how that plays out. But one thing that we do know though is that the Mets will be getting back in July or right around there, Jose Quintana. So that's going to be a real outlier there. The Mets are going to have to figure out what they have in Quintana now because this was a guy that was being depended on as a really big piece of the bottom half of that rotation coming in, right around that number 4 spot and being a real, valuable lefty out there in the rotation for Buck Showalter, right?
Exactly. He's dependent, but unfortunately been on the IL all season, and I'm just we're gonna have to see how this one turns out before we make that move of trading deadline.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. You're right about that. And with that, let's keep moving along here. As also too on the other side of town, it was really, really weird on Memorial Day because unfortunately on Memorial Day the Mets didn't play at all, and the Yankees didn't play until 9:40 that night. So, very, very strange circumstances. I mean, there are 3 days over the summer where you have to have full baseball schedules: Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Labor Day. So I feel like Major League Baseball, it's a big swing and a miss that they didn't have a full schedule on Monday, right, Dan?
Exactly. I'm not. This is like I've lost track how many times he put Robert Manfred on the Shizer list, but he's he's kind of on there again because of this messed up scheduling. There's one thing that's consistent: baseball on those 3 days. The other consistent with sports scheduling: the Knicks play on Christmas Day.
Yeah, you're right about that, man. Message to Adam Silver. Pick that up because the Knicks should be there every year. You're right. And yeah, hey, we mentioned Memorial Day, Labor Day, and 4th of July. Come on, Manfred. Make sure everybody's playing on those days. It's ridiculous that they're not. But so just to continue with that, the Yankees won on Monday night. They won last night. Aaron Judge continues to just be a house of fire as he leads the American League with 18 home runs. Pete Alonso leads the major leagues with 20 home runs. So both New York guys right at the top of the list there. Yankees going for the sweep tonight in Seattle. Seattle probably has a little the pitching edge as we'll take a look right now. Clark Schmidt going for the Yankees tonight, 2-5, 5.58 ERA. Going against Kirby, 5-4 this year, 3.43 ERA, off to a pretty good start. Um, what do you think, Dan? Right now, the Yankees going for their 5th straight win. They've won 7 of their last 10. The Yankees have really started to round into shape. It seemed about a month ago everybody was panicking, but really no need to panic anymore, right?
Yeah, they look like they're getting in at least as a wild card at this point.
Yeah, and
And
that's really just because Tampa Bay is in their division, right? I mean, any other division, you could really look at the Yankees and say this team really has a chance to win that division, and they still are in the hunt in the East. But it just seems like the Rays are on a roll right now.
yeah, exactly. Also, I have to say that today's game should be probably an easy win for the Yankees. On paper, at least, it should be an easy win. They're facing middle of the road Seattle team that's kind of like we're not sure if they're contenders or not. Probably an easy win for the Yankees on paper. Like I'm sure any Yankee fan, if the Yankees don't win, they would be shocked about that game.
Well, you're probably right too, especially with how hot the Yankees have been lately. And I also, much like you, view the Mariners as kind of a middle of the road team. The only thing I'd say that the Mariners have going in their favor tonight is the pitching matchup, because I'm not really that big a fan of Clark Schmidt. But we all know, man, that if there's anything that, and we see in the National League now too, old school American League baseball, and the Yankees do this better than anybody else. What's the best way to overcome a bad starting pitcher? Hit, 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 and hit, right? Just keep putting up those runs.
Yep, exactly. Though at the same time, might be a little easier said than done. Safeco is usually a place the pitcher's ballpark most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially out there in Seattle.
Wait a minute. My mistake. I called it by its old name. I forgot it's called Bobo Park.
Yeah, that's true.
I forgot they had a naming rights change.
That's true. But it's not like you called it the Kingdom. I mean, nobody remembers what the new name of that place is.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, yeah, let's keep rolling along here now. As Dan, a really, really, I was gonna go to the Eastern Conference Finals in the NBA, but before that, let's check over to the NBA real quick, as we had breaking news over the last day or two, where it's come out that the Knicks are not going to be retaining the services of general manager Scott Perry. That's very interesting, especially with the Knicks finally looking like they have a decent team on the court. They got the farthest they've been in a couple of years now. What's your reaction to that, Dan?
I'm shocked. Why would they do this? Can't they freaking trust in the process? He's gotten us there. We we we're right on the precipice of getting up there, and to do this uh, right now, after the team just had a pretty they moved one step up that ladder. What the heck? I was shocked. All right, come on, whatever having to trust in the process.
Well, you know what though, Dan, I do know what you're saying. I get where you're coming from. Even because especially you'd think that you'd want to keep this front office together because they're just starting to get on the same page. But to me, there has to be some kind of underlying thing here where, we both know that the president of the Knicks, Leon Rose, is the guy calling the shots. He's the guy that everything runs through. So the only thing I can think of is that maybe Leon Rose and Scott Perry just weren't on the same page anymore, and it was time to move on. Now, that's the only way that I would have, that I would be okay with this, because I agree with you that you'd think that now that everything is starting to come together, you would want Scott Perry to stay around, right? But the Knicks just must not feel that he is a big piece of that front office.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could guess. The way that some disagreements out there, but we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully, it's a step up in the right direction and not a step backwards, because it would be a disappointment if next season step backwards. I feel next year they got to get at least to the Eastern Conference Finals to be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with you. And they are going to be judged, very in a good light, or they're going to be judged very harshly if they go out there and make the wrong hire. Because even if the guy, whoever they hire to take over that spot, even if that guy has nothing to do with whatever the Knicks are doing this offseason, it's gonna look bad if the Knicks have a bad offseason. Now let's remember too, the Knicks also don't have a pick in the first round of this NBA draft. They do have their picks in the next 6 NBA drafts, as well as 4 additional first round picks that they have for different trades that they've worked out. They were hoping they could have had as high as 3 picks this year in the first round, but all of the things that needed to happen with these other teams in order for the Knicks to get those picks didn't work out. So the Knicks now sit no first round picks this year. They have a lot of decisions to make. So, the whole thing it comes down to, Dan, is picking the right guy, right? I mean, we know he's not going to be calling all the shots because Leon Rose is, but they have to get a guy that fits in well and makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully they make the decision. I'm shocked they're doing it so close to potentially the NBA draft. I think a couple of days after the final.
Yeah, it's true, man. It's true. So very interesting right there with the Knicks, as the Knicks right now, much like the other team at Madison Square Garden, the Rangers, they're both looking for different pieces right now. The Rangers have a GM and no coach, and the Knicks have a coach and no GM. So yeah, very interesting to see where both teams sit. But Dan, let's stick on the basketball for a minute here, as last night the Heat held off the Celtics in Game 7 after a crazy comeback, storming back from down 0-3. They tied the series 3-3, only to lose in 7 to the Heat. Now we're set up for a Miami-Denver NBA final. What's your reaction coming out of that series, Dan? Craziness, right?
Yeah, I was like crazy. It's like I looked on social media, and every person I follow on social media from Boston probably woke up in shock the next day from that.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I mean, this is the same city that saw their team come back from 3-0 against the Yankees in 2004. So they were probably getting all these dreams of being the first NBA team to ever do it. Because let's remind you, the Celtics are only the 4th NBA team ever to force a Game 7 after being down 0-3. They are, however, the first team to do that, to host Game 7 on their home court. But unfortunately for them, they're also the 4th consecutive team that forced that Game 7 to lose it. So, it's something that happens in the NBA every once in a while, but nobody has actually been able to complete that Red Sox Yankees 0-3 comeback, right?
Yeah, exactly. I I probably feel like people in Boston reacted the way I reacted in 2006 with the Mets, Game 7, the NLCS against the Cardinals. They probably had that same reaction I did as I'm walking out of Shea Stadium in shock that we lost that Game 7.
Yeah, just that look of devastation where you don't really know what the hell is going on. That look, we've seen that quite a few times over the years. And so I definitely feel for the Celtics fans, because that was the ultimate tease coming back like that. But hey, as a Knicks fan, sorry, pal, what are you going to do? Time to move on. But so, Dan, when we're looking at this Miami-Denver NBA final, um, who do you got? Are you willing to bet against the Heat? Or, do you think that Denver is going to that this is Denver's time to finally win their first championship? What do you think, Dan?
I think Denver is probably going to win this in 6. And probably some local cannabis shops in Denver will start naming strains of weed after the players.
Well, you might be right about that, man. And hey, from the considering the last time I was in Miami, you might be if the Heat win, they might be able to do the same thing down there. But
Actually, they probably wouldn't be able to do that because it's not legal in the state of Florida.
no, I know that, but I was just down there 6 weeks ago or whatever, 2 months ago, whatever it was, and believe me, you can walk into any shop and it's there. I couldn't believe it. It's easier to buy down in Florida than it is up here.
Yeah, that's surprising me, and it only just became legal here recently.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's what I thought, that it would be easier up here in New York because we're actually legal. Florida's not. But man, I'm telling you right now, you can go anywhere you want down there in Florida and get that shit.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where you have the so-called medicinal card. Wink, wink.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but though, to finish up on that real quick, I think I actually have Miami. I don't know. It's just so tough for me right now. Like, look, I'm a big fan of Denver's team. They have a great coach. Obviously Murray is a terrific talent. Jokic has been on a run. Like we really haven't seen in a couple of years. To be honest, I think that I don't, especially with a guy like Oladipo out, who's usually a good defensive player. I don't think there's anybody on Miami that can shut Jokic down. I could easily see Jokic averaging between 25 and 30 points a game in this series, but I just don't. I can't bet against Miami, man. They have that heart. They have that great coaching. Like, even though I do think Denver has a good coach too, Eric Spoelstra in Miami is the best coach in basketball, in my opinion. I don't think there's a better coach, top to bottom, in the league, and he gets the most out of his guys. Like I mentioned, let's not forget Victor Oladipo is out and hasn't played at all this postseason. Tyler Hero has been out the whole postseason run, and he might come back for Game 3. They're saying in the NBA Final, but I mean they haven't had the guy all run, so you just got to give all the credit in the world to Miami, man. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to bet against them now. You said that you picked Denver in 6. I agree with you. I think it's going to go 6 games, but I think Miami's going to pull it off and have one of the greatest championship runs in the history of sports. I'll go this far, Dan, because right now I think if you're talking about from a long shot perspective, I think right now the greatest run for long shots in the history of sports, for North American sports at least, for the 4 major ones that we care about, I think the 2007 Giants run, where they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl and ended their unbeaten season, I think that's the best long shot run in the history of sports. But I'm telling you right now, if Miami pulls this off and wins the final, I don't think it'll beat that Giant team, but it'll be right there with it. What do you think about that, Dan?
I think probably I agree with you on that one. That would be probably maybe the second biggest long shot run. Believe me, nothing can top that 2007 New York Giants. I mean, they defeated an undefeated Patriots team.
Exactly. Like maybe if
all the press and everything, they were just literally handing this thing to the Patriots. I heard in Boston they were taking pre-orders for a book about that season.
yeah,
And
man.
I said, oh boy, I have a feeling this is going to backfire on them big time. And I was right. The Giants won, and I have no problem with posting pictures to anyone that I know that's a Patriots fan. I love reminding them about that one Giant defeat.
Yeah,
I love showing them pictures of all the merch I have from that season.
You should, man, because that was one of the greatest runs. And yeah, I mean, I guess maybe if Denver was 82-0 in the regular season, then we could start talking. But I would still think that beating all Miami the way they've done, yeah, I think it would be right up there with the Giants. So But that just goes to show the rarefied air that this Heat run has been on so far. Because you just have to give them credit, man. How many teams, after blowing a 3-0 lead like that, would have just folded like a cheap suit and been done? I mean, we saw that Yankees team in 2004 that blew that 0-3 lead. They came out in Game 7. By the second inning, they were done. It was over. Johnny Damon hits a grand slam, and it's bye-bye, Kevin Brown. See you later, Yankees, and they're out. It was the complete opposite. This time, the Heat just came in Game 7 and grabbed it, and before you knew it, they were up by 20 points, and the Celtics were done. So, it really, it really just goes to show that this Heat team really has what it takes, and it doesn't matter what kind of hole they're in. I'm not counting this team out.
Yep, exactly. They managed to not hold their composure, even all those defeats, and it maybe got to Game 7, but they came through in the clutch, and now they're in the NBA Finals.
Absolutely, buddy. Absolutely. So now we'll keep rolling on. We're going to end it a little bit early today, just because Dan's at the game and we want him to enjoy himself. And I also think that the listeners would appreciate not hearing a plane fly over every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately, for those of you outside the New York area don't know, Citi Field is in close proximity with LaGuardia Airport. So you get planes that are flying, taking off and landing. Same thing with Shea Stadium before this building, the old stadium. Shea Stadium was like that too, the airplane. So
and if you could believe it, and if you could believe it, Citi Field is actually better than Shea Stadium used to be, because when they built this stadium, they actually rerouted a couple of those flights, so it's not even as bad as Shea.
Exactly. So all you Met fans, if you notice that, give credit to the air traffic controller that handles it.
Absolutely. Hug an air traffic controller if you see them today, because those guys are incredible.
And I got to give a lot of props to the people that work in the aviation industry. I got relatives that work in I got a relative that works for an airline. I also got a cousin who's a pilot for a charter company, for one of those charter companies. So
wow, very cool.
I got some friends that work I know people that work in the business. So I do have a lot of I got to give a lot of props to all the work they do, all the amount of hours they spend away from home to get all of us from point A to point B.
Absolutely, man. It's a big undertaking, and a lot of great people go into that to like you said, get us from point A to point B and get us there safe. So tip of the cap to all you men and women out there doing a great job. And Dan, so I think we're just about done here. Last thing that we have on the docket for today would be the Stanley Cup final is set. The Las Vegas Golden Knights dispatched of the Dallas Stars in Game 6 in a blowout, and the Florida Panthers swept their way to the Stanley Cup final. We now have 2 expansion teams here in the Stanley Cup final, 2 teams who have only been to the Cup final once, and both have lost their only appearance. So we will have a first-time Stanley Cup champion coming out of this, man. What are your feelings going into this? It's a pretty cool matchup, right?
Well, I got to say, no one predicted this one. Also, I do have to say, not only could it potentially be a first-time thing, if Las Vegas wins this Stanley Cup final, it could be the first sports championship for an entire city overall. Las Vegas has never won a major sports championship. This would be history for the entire city of Las Vegas.
Wow, that's a really, really good point. You're right. So I wonder if a team does win, like if the Vegas Golden Knights do pull this off and win the championship, I wonder, is their version of coming down the Canyon of Heroes going to be going down the Las Vegas Strip?
That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm guessing. I'm just assuming it's a Las Vegas trip. I don't know anyone that has any insight into how Las Vegas does the planning for this show, but I'm assuming the Las Vegas Strip is where the parade would be
Wow,
if they won the cup.
that's a really good point. Yeah, and Florida it would be their first Stanley Cup championship, but the state of Florida already has three on the
Especially South Florida. They've had a history with some championships in the past.
yes,
One
no
one of
doubt
the most
about it.
notable in history was that undefeated Dolphins team in the 1970s.
That's true. 1972 Dolphins. You're absolutely right about that. They still the only undefeated team in the history of the NFL. So yeah, very very true, man. You're right about that. So South Florida has a history of championships. So and it's pretty cool that the Golden Knights have an entire city riding on their backs, hoping to get their first major championship. Dan, just looking at it from a purely statistical and team perspective, who do you like going into this matchup?
I just have a feeling Las Vegas they look hungry for that championship. The way they just blew out that Eastern Conference Finals, and these players have just gotten hot at the right time. Plus, I feel like Jack Eichel is eager to have that championship. And then I have to give a lot of props to Eichel for coming back from an injury. And just from the standpoint of coming back from an injury, that is not an easy task, not just for an athlete, but for a human being. To get injured, all the rehab you have to do to get back to where you were before you were injured, if there's a possibility you can get back to that state, your body can get back to that state, it's a lot of work. I've seen friends and relatives go through it.
You're absolutely right, man. I mean, and especially the type of injury that Jack Eichel went through, where he missed so much time, and there was a lot of questions if he could even come back and be a comparable player to what he once was. And he had a pretty good regular season, around 70 points. But you know what? He's really making his money in the playoffs, as he has been an outstanding player. I forget what his numbers were in Game 6 where they clinched, but coming into that game, he had 6 goals and 12 assists for 18 points during this playoff run. So I mean, that's going about a little bit more than a point a game, right around there. So he is having a phenomenal debut for the playoffs in his career. And, he's been around so long at this point, we forget how young he is. Jack Eichel is still only 26 years old. So the Vegas Knights got their hands on a good one there. And I agree with you. I think that Vegas, has the edge probably going into it. And I just feel like they're going to seal the deal now. They've been there once. They got there in 2017, the 2018 year. And they didn't get it done then with our old coach, Gerard Gallant, as their boss back then. But I don't know, man. I just see them getting done. My prediction would be, I say Golden Knights in 6. How about you?
I say the same thing. They're gonna win this in 6 games, and
Well,
probably in typical playoff hockey fashion, 6 close games.
exactly. Oh yeah, all within a goal or two. I totally agree with you, because Florida has had this magical run, but I'm not counting them out. I don't think they're going to get smacked around. It would not surprise me if they won. I don't expect them to, but it would not surprise me. I'm not about to count out Sergei Bobrovsky and the incredible run he's been on in this playoff. I mean, let's not forget about Matthew Tkachuk, who's been great for them, Aaron Ekbald. So there have been a lot of standout players on the Panthers. But yeah, I just think the Golden Knights are going to be the team to get it done. So yeah, we're in agreement there. And I think that's just about going to do it for us today, buddy. Before we get out of here, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Sure, I gotta plug my Twitter account, Bobo103NYC on Twitter, Bobo718BK on Instagram, Daniel Curlin on YouTube for all your Bobo content on YouTube. There's plenty of stuff.
Absolutely. No doubt about it, man. Make sure to follow Bobo there and check him out. And if you want to check out what we're doing on the show, check us out at BSith_podcast on Twitter. You can check me out there at my last name, Kramer NY. And you can check out the show on Instagram at Best Seat in the House Podcast. Also, don't forget, if you're on Rumble, subscribe to us there and check us out. We post all new videos on there. And as always on YouTube, subscribe and give us a like if you think we've earned it. So I think that's just about going to do it for us today. As always, I'm your host, Rob Kramer, with my co-host, Daniel Bobo Curlin, and this is the Best Seat in the House podcast. We'll catch you next week, everybody.